first glance, this looks like an old PlayStation 1. But inside, it's actually a fully functional gaming PC. It even has a dedicated graphics card and enough power to play most modern games. And that's not the coolest part. The original power button still turns the PC on, and the disc lid can still open and close, while also helping improve airflow. In this video, I'll show you all the features of this build, and how I managed to fit an entire PC inside a PS1 shell. The first thing we need is a PS1 to use as the case. By pure coincidence, I found one sitting in the corner of a cabinet where it had been forgotten for years. It still has that classic gray color, but it's far from perfect. The hardware inside is broken, and a few parts are missing. For me, that's not a problem. If anything, it just adds to the retro charm. My goal is to preserve the original design as much as possible. I want to avoid cutting or modifying the exterior unless absolutely necessary. I also plan to reuse the original power and reset buttons to control the PC inside. As for the disc lid, I'll leave it open while the system is running to help with airflow and keep temperatures under control. Now I'm going to take it apart and see what's inside. I want to understand the internal layout and take a few measurements before planning the build. Thankfully, getting inside is pretty easy. All I need to do is remove a handful of screws from the bottom, and the entire shell comes apart. Oh my god! For a console that's been around for nearly 30 years, it's actually much cleaner than I expected. It's definitely not perfect, but I've seen far worse. Now it's time to remove the components one by one. If you don't know, this is the power supply responsible for powering the entire system. The design is actually pretty simple by today's standards, but when you remember that this technology was created nearly 3 decades ago, it starts to feel much more impressive. Back then, hardware like this represented some of the most advanced consumer technology you could buy. There isn't much else inside that's worth spending time on, so let's move on to the next stage, figuring out what hardware can actually fit in here. After taking a few measurements, I found that I have about 26 centimeters of usable length and roughly 16 centimeters of width to work with. At first glance, that sounds promising. A mini ITX motherboard can fit inside this PS1 without much trouble. But there's a catch. If I use a standard mini ITX setup, I probably won't have enough room left for both a power supply and a dedicated graphics card. And that's where things start getting complicated. I've been going back and forth trying to decide what hardware makes the most sense for this build. In the previous video, some of you suggested using a laptop motherboard instead. It's not a bad idea. The problem is that most of the old laptops I own either have motherboards that are too large or hardware that's simply too outdated. And if I'm going to spend all this time building a custom PS1 PC, I don't want the final result to end up slower than the original project. But then I found something that could solve that problem, a Lenovo Mini PC. What makes it perfect for this project is that it uses an external power adapter, just like a laptop charger. That means I can completely eliminate a bulky internal power supply, instantly freeing up a huge amount of space inside the PS1 case. For graphics, I'm planning to install a low-profile GPU mounted directly to the motherboard using this 90-degree PCIe riser. That should allow everything to fit within the height limitations of the case. As for the hardware, I'll be using an NVIDIA Quadro K1200 with 4 GB of VRAM, paired with an Intel Core i7-6700. For memory, I'm using laptop-style RAM that sits flat against the motherboard rather than standing upright like desktop DIMMs. Alright, the next step turned out to be a lot more complicated than I expected. After spending quite a bit of time measuring, repositioning parts, and staring at the empty shell, I think I finally found a layout that makes sense. My plan is to have all of the motherboard and GPU I/O ports facing the left side of the console. That should make cable management easier and keep the exterior looking cleaner. The first thing I need to do is remove all of the plastic supports, mounting posts, and other structures that get in the way. The goal is to let the motherboard sit as low as possible inside the case. Once that's done, I'll sand the area down a little to smooth everything out and make it look more presentable. After that, it's time to drill the mounting holes for the motherboard. This time, I'm going to run the screws from the outside of the case inward. To mount the board, I'll be using 6mm threaded standoffs with threads on both ends. That gives me a proper mounting system while also creating enough clearance between the motherboard and the bottom of the PS1 shell. Once the standoffs were in place, I lined up the motherboard and started tightening everything down. honestly, I was a little surprised by how solid it felt. There's barely any movement at all. At this point, I figured I was making good progress, so I started test fitting the rest of the hardware and tried putting the top cover back on. And that's when reality hit me. There was still a ton of plastic inside getting in the way. Every time I thought I was done, I'd find another piece stopping the lid from closing properly. So I grabbed the cutting tool and went right back to work. What I thought would take maybe 20 minutes ended up taking nearly 3 hours. No joke. I had to keep trimming, test fitting, marking new spots, then trimming again. I seriously underestimated how much space the hardware would take up inside this little PS1 shell. But eventually, after what felt like endless cutting, I tried one last time. And there it was. The top cover finally dropped into place. After all that work, seeing the two halves come together properly was incredibly satisfying. But in reality, there were still a lot of challenges ahead. The biggest one was that all of the I/O ports were still blocked by the PS1 shell, so I had to take more measurements and start cutting again. I'll fast forward to the finished result. And there we go. Now all of the I/O ports have enough clearance for us to actually use them. The problem is that the power button on this system isn't connected through a standard motherboard front panel header. Instead, it's built directly into a small board with a soldered switch. That makes things a little more complicated because I can't just plug in a power switch cable like I would on a normal PC. Fortunately, the way it works is still pretty similar. All I needed to do was find the two contact points that are connected when the button is pressed. After a bit of probing and testing, I finally found them. These 2 points are responsible for triggering the power on signal. So all I had to do was solder my power switch wires directly to those contacts, and perfect, it works. The original PS1 power button can now turn the PC on just like it did nearly 30 years ago. The next challenge was figuring out how to secure it in place. That turned out to be a difficult problem for me. I didn't want to use glue because it can get messy and doesn't look very professional. So instead, I decided to drill 2 small screws on either side of the button. The idea was to let the edges of the screw heads hold the power button firmly in place. And just like that, I managed to reuse the original power button with a very simple solution. I've successfully reused the original power button without making any major changes to the outside of the PS1. The next problem I had to deal with was the headphone jack. It's located on the inside of the case, which means once the lid is closed, there's no way to access it. So I needed another solution. My idea was to use a pair of extension cables with a male connector on one end and a female connector on the other. The plan is to route the female end to the outside edge of the case so it's easy to access. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a shorter cable, but honestly, that's not a huge problem. All I need to do is drill 2 holes sized perfectly for the headphone jack, and just like that, the audio problem is solved. There is already a small speaker inside the system, but if you want to connect external speakers or a pair of headphones, this is definitely a feature worth having. At this point, the project was almost finished, but there was still one detail that bothered me: the 2 memory card slots. Because I removed all of the original hardware inside, they were left as 2 large empty openings on the front of the console. And honestly, it didn't look very good, so I came up with a simple solution. I decided to reuse the original memory card slot doors and reinstall them in their original positions. The goal wasn't functionality, I just wanted the front of the PS1 to look more complete and a little closer to the original design. And there we go. It's definitely not perfect, but it looks much better than 2 giant empty holes staring back at me. And with that, the build is finally complete. I'm honestly pretty happy with how it turned out. Not only does it still look like a PS1, but I also managed to preserve some of its original features, which was one of my goals from the very beginning. Now it's finally time to enjoy the result of all that work. To start things off, I'm going to test a few classic games that people loved playing on the original PlayStation. I'm genuinely excited to see how this thing performs. First up is Gran Turismo, and the results are exactly what I was hoping for. The game runs at almost the maximum frame rate it supports, hovering around 30 frames per second. What's even more impressive is how little effort the hardware is putting in. CPU and GPU usage are both extremely low, almost insignificant. For a system like this, it's an easy workload. Next up is what many people consider one of the greatest games ever made: Metal Gear Solid. And just like Gran Turismo, the results are exactly what you'd expect. The game stays locked at its maximum supported frame rate of 30 frames per second. It looks like this hardware is more than capable of handling PS1 games. In fact, there's so much performance left on the table that I decided to see how it would handle some Windows games. First up is Tomb Raider. Running at 1080p on high settings, the frame rate stays comfortably above 60 FPS. At this point, it feels like we're starting to reach the limits of the GPU because it's sitting at nearly 100% usage the entire time. Still, temperatures are under control and the overall experience is surprisingly smooth. Next, I moved on to CS2. Even on low settings, the system manages to stay above 60 FPS. For a machine stuffed inside a PS1 shell, that's honestly pretty impressive. More importantly, I didn't notice any major stuttering or frame drops while playing, but things start to change when we get to a much heavier title like Cyberpunk 2077. Here, the GPU quickly runs out of ROM. As a result, performance takes a noticeable hit, dropping to around 20 to 30 frames per second. And there's another issue. When the system is pushed to its limits, the cooling fan becomes quite loud. It's not unbearable, but it's definitely noticeable and not particularly pleasant. Overall, though, I'm still really impressed with how this project turned out. So what do you think of this PS1 gaming PC? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.